On her way to a meeting, she saw her husband, who said he would stay home, entering a restaurant alone. Her heart raced. By intuition, she decided to follow him and froze at what she saw. The cold air of Curitiba cut through her skin, but it wasn't the weather that made Fernanda's heart freeze. It was the sight across the street. Diogo, her husband, the one who that morning had given her a sleepy kiss on the forehead and mumbled something about an entire day of home office buried in spreadsheets and the couple's financial pending matters. He said he wouldn't even change out of his pajamas. And yet, there he was in the pulsating heart of the city, dressed in his best khaki pants and a blue shirt that she herself had ironed 2 days before. He didn't look like someone solving banking problems. He looked like someone with a purpose, an urgent destination that didn't include her. The honking of a car behind her Uber brought her back to reality. The meeting. She had an important meeting in less than 20 minutes, a contract that could define the next semester of the hotel she managed with such care. For 12 years, her life had been an equation of logic and planning. Every step, every decision was calculated. Fernanda was the rock, the anchor, not just at work, but at home. She was the one who organized the finances, who remembered birthdays, who planned vacations. Diogo, with his more airy and dreamy way, always said she was his compass. But where was he navigating now, without her? He crossed the street, looking around with a haste that bordered on paranoia, his cell phone glued to his ear. It wasn't the walk of someone going to a bank or a government office. It was the walk of someone who was late for something secret. The word arose in her mind, unwanted and poisonous, like a weed sprouting in the middle of her carefully cultivated garden. She felt a sharp pain in her temple, the herald of a migraine that always attacked her in moments of extreme stress. "Ma'am, traffic is going to move. What's the building number, please?" asked the driver with a patience she didn't possess at that moment. Fernanda looked at the man behind the wheel, a complete stranger, and then at the figure of her husband, who was now turning the corner, disappearing from her sight. The meeting, the contract, her professional reputation, all of this weighed on one side of the scale. On the other, a simple and devastating question. Why? Why would Diogo lie about something so mundane? What was around that corner that was more important than the truth, more important than the trust they had taken years to build? She thought about the last few months. Diogo had been more distant, yes. He arrived later from work, claiming new and demanding projects. He spent more time on his phone smiling at the screen, and when she asked, he always had a ready excuse. "It's the soccer group, love. Just nonsense." She chose to believe. She chose to believe because the alternative was too frightening. The alternative was admitting that the ground beneath. At 36 years old, after a life of battles won and stability conquered through hard work, the idea of a crack in her marriage was an earthquake she wasn't prepared for. The image of him, hurried and furtive, wouldn't leave her head. This wasn't the Diogo she knew. Her Diogo was predictable, almost methodical in his habits. He hated downtown, complained about traffic, noise, crowds. He said it was unnecessary chaos. And yet, there he was, voluntarily diving into this chaos. A wave of nausea invaded her. The meeting, the hotel, the contract. Everything suddenly seemed small, insignificant. There was a truth that needed to be discovered, a wound that, if it existed, needed to be exposed to light no matter how painful it was. Instinct, that primitive voice we so often ignore in the name of reason, screamed inside her, and for the first time in a long time, Fernanda decided to listen to it. She leaned forward, her voice coming out firmer than she felt. "Sir, excuse me. Can you stop here, please? I had an emergency. I'm not going to the meeting anymore." The driver looked at her through the rearview mirror, surprised, but obeyed. As soon as the car stopped, Fernanda paid for the ride through the app, grabbed her purse, and got out, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cold wind now seemed like an ally, a shock of reality that kept her standing. She walked with firm steps toward the corner where Diogo had disappeared. Each step was a bet against the happiness she believed she had. Each step brought her closer to a truth that could destroy everything. But backing down was no longer an option. She needed to know, needed to see with her own eyes what was so important as to make her husband lie and sneak through the streets like a stranger in his own life. Whatever was waiting for her after that corner, she would face it alone. Fernanda's hand trembled slightly as she took her phone from her purse. The screen glowed with her boss's photo, but her mind was miles away at the corner she had just turned. With the most controlled voice she could muster, she made the call. "Ricardo, it's me. I apologize 1,000 times. I know it's last minute, but I won't be able to make it to the meeting. My migraine hit with everything. I'm seeing bright spots. I'm not in condition." It was a half-truth. The pain in her head was real, pulsing in sync with her anxiety, but its cause wasn't neurological. It was emotional. On the other side of the line, Ricardo was understanding, as always. He wished her well and told her not to worry. Upon hanging up, Fernanda felt a chill. Lying was that easy. For Diogo, it seemed to be. She quickened her pace, the sound of her heels echoing on the sidewalk like a countdown. The fear of losing sight of him was an engine that propelled her. And then she saw him. Diogo wasn't far. He stopped in front of a new establishment, a cafe with a glass and dark wood facade. So modern and elegant it seemed out of place on the more traditional street. The name Granfino was engraved in discreet golden letters. It wasn't the type of place Diogo would frequent. He preferred old bars with cheap beer and greasy portions, another piece that didn't fit in her husband's puzzle. He hesitated for an instant at the door, looked at his phone once more, and then entered. Fernanda acted on pure instinct. She crossed the street, her heart out of rhythm, and positioned herself behind a pillar of an old building on the other side, an observation point that gave her a clear view of the cafe's interior through the wide window. The place was bright and airy, with couples talking quietly and executives typing on their laptops. And there was Diogo, taking off his coat, his gaze sweeping the environment with an expectation she hadn't seen in him in years. That's when a figure stood up from a table further back, almost a blind spot for anyone passing on the street, but perfectly visible from Fernanda's angle. It was a blonde woman with haircut and a modern bob that swayed with each movement. She seemed to be at most 25 years old, dressed in a cream-colored cashmere sweater that hugged her curves. She opened a smile upon seeing him, a smile that wasn't just welcoming, it was a smile of possession, of intimacy, one that said, "Finally, you arrived." Fernanda held her breath. The air seemed to have solidified in her lungs. Diogo walked to the table and, instead of a handshake or formal wave, he leaned over and placed a kiss on her cheek, a kiss that lasted a second longer than socially acceptable. His hand briefly rested on the small of her back, a small gesture almost imperceptible to the rest of the world. But for Fernanda, it was a scream. She watched, paralyzed as he sat down. The conversation flowed instantly. He gestured, smiled in an open and captivating way that she thought he reserved only for her in the good times. The woman laughed, touching his arm from time to time, her head tilted in a gesture of admiration and flirtation that was impossible to mistake. They were a couple. They acted like a couple at the height of passion, in that stage where the outside world disappears and only the two of them exist. The waiter approached and they ordered 2 coffees and a slice of cake with 2 forks. The cake. That was a punch to Fernanda's stomach. Diogo was diabetic, controlled, but diabetic. For years she had monitored his sugar intake, prepared special meals, reminded him to take his medications. And there he was, about to share a sugar bomb with a stranger, as if nothing mattered. The lie wasn't just to her, it was to himself. She even doubted if it was really him. The scene unfolded like a silent and cruel movie. She saw the woman's hand slide across the table and find Diogo's. He didn't pull it away. On the contrary, he intertwined his fingers with hers. Then, with his other hand, he caressed her face, his thumb drawing soft circles on her cheek. It was a tender gesture, a gesture that belonged to Fernanda. It was the gesture he made to her on Sunday mornings when they woke up without hurry. Seeing it being given to another person was like feeling a limb of her body being amputated without anesthesia. The pain in Fernanda's temple intensified, becoming a sharp and throbbing stab. The world around her lost focus. Cars, pedestrians, city sounds all became an indistinct blur. The only clear thing was that table, that scene of explicit and shameless betrayal. The man she loved, her life partner, was living another life, one in which she was just an obstacle, a routine he needed to escape from. The image of him smiling at the blonde while their fingers touched on the table burned into her retina. The initial shock gave way to a cutting coldness, a terrible clarity. The ice that formed around Fernanda's heart began to crack, giving way to boiling lava of indignation. Each caress, each smile exchanged between Diogo and the woman was a shovelful of dirt thrown over their 10 years of marriage. She watched motionless until he said something to the blonde, got up, and walked toward the cafe exit. Alone. He put on a pair of sunglasses, aviator model that Fernanda had never seen him wear, and took a cigarette from his pocket. That was the last straw. Diogo didn't smoke. He had a phobia of cigarettes, an almost fanatic aversion he had inherited after losing his father to lung cancer. He always said that the smell of smoke made him relive the hospital's suffering. And now there he was, about to light one, as if it were the most natural habit in the world. That man at the cafe door wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was a complete stranger, an actor playing an unknown role. Anger overcame pain. Fernanda didn't think. She acted. She crossed the street in long, firm strides, ignoring the closed pedestrian light and the irritated honking of a taxi. She stopped a step away from him, right as he brought the lighter to the cigarette. "Diogo?" Her voice came out harsher than she intended. He startled, a spasm of pure panic that he tried to disguise but that she saw clearly. The lighter fell from his hand, producing a metallic noise on the concrete. He turned to her, and from behind the dark lenses, Fernanda felt his shock. But what came next was so surreal, so audacious, that it left her breathless. He stared at her for a second, and then his posture changed. His shoulders relaxed, his head tilted slightly, and a polite, almost condescending smile appeared on his lips. Even the tone of his voice was different, deeper, more nasal. "Excuse me, ma'am, I think you're confusing me with someone else." Fernanda blinked, incredulous. The denial was so absurd, so brazen, that for a moment she questioned her own sanity. It was him. The same height, the same face shape, the same discreet mole above his upper lip. The clothes. But the performance was that of a stranger. Before she could react, the cafe door opened, and the blonde woman appeared, stopping beside him with a rehearsed naturalness. She put her arm through his, a protective and possessive gesture. "Any problem, my dear?" she asked, looking at Fernanda with an expression of false concern. Then she turned to her and said in a sweet and venomous voice, "I'm Leticia. This is Raphael, my boyfriend. I think you're confusing him with someone else." Fernanda opened her mouth to protest, to scream that this was her husband. But Leticia continued in an incredible monologue. "This has happened other times, you know. It's impressive. We even joke that he must have a twin brother lost around the city, like those stories you only see in soap operas. You're not the first person to get confused." She gave a little laugh, as if sharing an inside joke. "Now, if you'll excuse us, let's go, Rafa. We're late." Leticia pulled him gently by the arm, and he, Raphael, simply let himself be led. He cast Fernanda one last look over his shoulder, a look that was a mixture of apology and warning. They walked away down the sidewalk, leaving Fernanda standing there, astonished. The audacity was so great, so well executed, that a seed of doubt blossomed in the midst of her shock. Could it be possible? Such a perfect double. A man who eats sweets without worry, who smokes, who goes by Raphael. "This isn't the husband I know," a voice whispered in her mind. The doubt lasted only a second, but it was enough to destabilize her. Then she remembered a detail: the uniform. She still wore the blazer with the discreet hotel logo embroidered on the chest. Making a scene there, being seen as an uncontrolled woman, a jealous madwoman, could have professional consequences. Public humiliation would be the cherry on top of her personal disgrace. Swallowing the bile that rose in her throat, she composed herself, turned her back, and walked in the opposite direction, pretending to the world that she had believed that ridiculous farce. But as soon as she turned the corner, away from curious looks, she stopped and leaned against the cold wall of a building, her body trembling. Confusion and anger fought inside her. She pulled her phone from her purse with trembling fingers and dialed Diogo's number, the number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and went straight to voicemail. His recorded voice, cheerful and familiar, sounded like mockery. "Hi, you called Diogo. Leave your message and I'll return it as soon as I can." She tried again and again. Same result. Voicemail. The theater, the lie, that woman's complicity. Everything fit together. It wasn't a double. It was him. And he was willing to go to the last consequences to protect his double life. That act at the cafe wasn't improvised. It was a plan. A calculating coldness began to replace the shock. She wouldn't go home to cry, wouldn't tear her hair out. She would go home to think. This was no longer a broken heart problem. It was war. And if Diogo thought he could mock her intelligence in that way, he was about to discover how wrong his assessment was. Fernanda put away her phone, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the taxi stand. The apartment door closed behind Fernanda with a soft click, a sound that contrasted violently with the storm raging inside her. The silence of the house, which before was a refuge, now seemed complicit, heavy with the lie that impregnated it. For a moment, she stood in the entrance hall, her purse still hanging on her shoulder, just breathing the air of her own home, which suddenly smelled of deception. The image of that man, Raphael, with his forced voice and his forbidden cigarette, was a haunting. The doubt, that small and poisonous seed planted by their audacity, was still trying to take root in her mind. She needed physical proof, something tangible that would annihilate any remnant of uncertainty. Her feet took her, almost by their own will, to the couple's bedroom, their bedroom. The bed was unmade, exactly as she had left it in the morning's rush. His scent was still on the pillow. With her heart beating a dull and painful rhythm, she opened his closet doors. Her gaze methodically swept the hangers, dress shirts, t-shirts, polos. She looked for the blue shirt, that celestial tone that enhanced his eyes. The same one she had ironed with such care. It wasn't there. Her stomach contracted. Next, she crouched down, her fingers searching the bottom shelf where he kept his folded pants. The beige khaki pants, his favorite for more dressed casual occasions, as he himself said, also wasn't there. It was like a verdict. If there was still a molecule of doubt in her body, it evaporated at that instant. The absence of those two pieces of clothing was a silent confession. It was irrefutable proof. He wasn't a double, he was Diogo, and he was a liar, a cynical and meticulous liar. A wave of fury swept through her so intense she had to hold onto the closet door to keep from falling. The urge was to tear all his clothes from there, throw them out the window, burn every trace of his existence in that house. But then the image of that condescending smile of Raphael and Letitia's victorious expression came back to her mind. They had treated her like a fool, a madwoman, and the worst thing she could do now was act like one. No, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The anger transformed, solidified into a determination cold as steel. She needed to pretend, needed to be the best actress that ever existed, and needed to plan each step with the intelligence they had so brazenly mocked. 3 hours passed. 3 hours in which Fernanda took a long shower, changed clothes, made strong coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, forcing herself to a calm she didn't feel. She rehearsed her expression in the window's reflection, an air of tiredness, a hint of worry, but nothing of suspicion. When she heard the sound of the key in the door, her entire body stiffened, but her face remained serene. Diogo entered, and the sight of him was a masterpiece of dissimulation. He wore an old soccer team t-shirt and sweatshorts. His hair, previously somewhat long, was freshly cut, the sides trimmed with precision. He had the air of someone who had spent the day at home fighting domestic problems, an air of studied innocence. "Hi, love," he said, his voice sounding tired. He approached and tried to kiss her, but Fernanda turned her face subtly, making the kiss land on her cheek. "Hi. New haircut?" she asked in a casual tone. "Ah, yes. Carlos recommended a guy who cuts at home. Since the internet wasn't working, I took advantage of the idle time," he responded, already connecting the rehearsed excuse. "Man, what a day. The internet went down early. I spent all day trying to fix it, called the operator. Chaos. In the end, I gave up and went to Carlos's house, the neighbor. He lent me his internet so I could work there. I spent the whole afternoon in his kitchen, poor guy." He opened the refrigerator, grabbed a water bottle, everything with a naturalness that turned Fernanda's stomach. "I tried to call you," she said, observing his every movement. "I know. I saw the calls when I turned on my phone. Now the battery died, and in the rush to go to Carlos's house, I forgot the charger. Damn. But I already called about the internet. They said a technician will come tomorrow." He turned to her, expecting a reaction, a word of comfort, and Fernanda gave it to him. She breathed deeply, summoned all her strength, and smiled. A small, tired smile. "It's okay, love. These things happen." She paused as if remembering something trivial. "Speaking of strange things, you won't believe it. Today, when I was going to that meeting I ended up canceling, I saw a man on the street. I swear, Diogo, he looked exactly like you. I was even shocked." She observed him attentively. A muscle in his jaw contracted almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his composure. Really? How funny. They say everyone has a double out there, he said, forcing a laugh. Yeah, but forget it. Must just be my impression. She got up, took her cup, and carried it to the sink. I'm going to get ahead on some work things here on my laptop. I'll use my phone's internet until we fix ours tomorrow. She walked away, leaving him in the kitchen. Every word had been a monumental effort, every smile a lie that weighed on her soul. But sitting at her desk and turning on the computer, she didn't just feel the weight of the farce, she also felt the power. He thought he had fooled her. He thought he was in control. Little did he know that the game had just turned and that the player he underestimated was about to make her first move. Night fell over the apartment like a heavy blanket. Diogo, exhausted from his battle with the internet and his performance as a dedicated husband, fell asleep quickly, emitting a soft and constant snoring. For Fernanda, that sound, which before was comforting, now sounded like the purring of a satisfied predator. The house was silent, but her mind was a whirlwind of activity. The time to act had arrived. On tiptoes, she took his car keys from the entrance table. Her heart beat strongly, not from fear, but from a cold and focused adrenaline. Before leaving, she made a whispered video call to her friend Helena, a seasoned divorce lawyer who had seen everything. Are you sure about this, Faye? Helena asked, her voice full of concern through the phone. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Lena. He mocked me. I need proof. I need to understand the extent of all this before taking the next step. Helena sighed. Okay. The tracker is small, magnetic. Look for a clean metal surface under the car, near one of the wheels, but more toward the center, away from the exhaust. Clean the spot with the cloth that came with it, and just attach it. It will stick. The app is already on your phone, remember? Just activate it. Following the instructions, Fernanda went down to the building's dark and silent garage. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Every distant noise made her hold her breath. Kneeling on the cold cement floor, she found the perfect spot under Diogo's car. The metallic click of the tracker attaching to the chassis was the most satisfying sound she had heard all day, the sound of control returning to her hands. Back in the apartment, the second part of the plan. She took Diogo's phone, which was charging on the nightstand. His hands were relaxed on his chest, his breathing deep. For an instant, she observed him sleeping, the face she had loved for decades, now a mask. With a coldness that surprised her, she unlocked the device. The password was her birthday date. What irony. And opened WhatsApp. On her own laptop, she opened the WhatsApp web page. The QR code appeared on the screen. She pointed his phone's camera and, in less than 5 seconds, an exact copy of his conversations, of his secret life, blossomed on her computer screen. She quickly archived the conversation with Lay on his phone so it wouldn't be visible in the main list and put it back on the charger, exactly as it was. Before finally allowing herself to lie down, something pulled her back to the closet. She opened his door again, and there they were, the beige khaki pants folded impeccably, the celestial blue shirt hanging on a hanger as if they had never left there. She took the shirt collar and brought it to her nose. The smell was there, not his everyday cologne, but a woody cologne, more intense, that he kept for special occasions. That night, Fernanda didn't sleep. Lying next to the man who had become a stranger, she pretended a peaceful sleep, while on her phone's small screen, the tracker app showed a stable blue dot in the garage. She didn't need to look anymore. The real action was on the laptop she had left open on her desk. The following days were an exercise in supreme self-control. Fernanda lived 2 lives. During the day, she was the normal wife who listened to Diogo's work complaints, who prepared dinner, who asked about his day. At night, when he slept, she became a silent investigator. The cloned WhatsApp was a window into the rot. The conversations between Rafa and Lay were a cheap soap opera script, melting nicknames like My Bear and My Little Blonde, heart and kiss emojis he never used with her, and the plans. She scrolled back, reading the history, and saw the arrangement for the cafe meeting. The twin brother farce, planned in case something went wrong. Her intelligence hadn't just been mocked, it had been insulted in an outrageous way. The most recent messages showed his fear. Rafa was apprehensive. I think she suspected something, my love. Saw a guy who looked like me on the street. I don't know. We need to take a break. Let the dust settle, he wrote. Lee's response was impatient, full of arrogant confidence. Relax, little bear. She's a fool. She swallowed the twin story. You yourself said she wouldn't suspect anything. I can't stand missing you. We need to see each other. He asked for patience, said it was risky. but her insistence was constant. And finally, after some days of back and forth, he gave in. Fernanda saw the message arrive in real time, her heart freezing in her chest. "Okay, you won, my stubborn little blonde," wrote Diogo. "2 weeks from now at that new Italian restaurant you wanted to try. I'll invent a dinner with the board. It'll be our special night, I promise." The message was followed by a detailed script. The time, the restaurant name, the suggestion that she wear a red dress he adored. He was planning a romantic encounter with his mistress, using the same tactics and planning he had once used to win her over. Fernanda closed the laptop. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks, not to suffer or despair, but to prepare, to organize her finances, to contact her lawyer, to plan her own triumphant entrance. The script for their special night was outlined, but they didn't know that the director of that spectacle, the true owner of the final script, would be her. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest and most suffocating of Fernanda's life. Diogo, scared by the possibility of being discovered, transformed into the husband of dreams. He started working exclusively from home, avoiding any unnecessary outings. He woke up earlier to prepare her breakfast with cut fruits and fresh bread. At night he researched recipes and prepared elaborate dinners, asking if she was enjoying it, if the seasoning was good. He showered her with compliments, said how much he loved her, how important she was. Each gesture of affection was like a touch of poison. Each "I love you" was a knife that pierced a little deeper. Fernanda felt physical disgust, a repulsion she had to swallow along with the little foods he prepared. But she became an impeccable actress. She smiled, thanked, complimented back. She said she was happy to have him more present, that she missed this attention. Inside, she counted the days, hours, minutes. While he played the role of perfect husband, she, in the gaps of the day and in the silent early hours, prepared the final act. The conversations with Helena, her lawyer friend, were daily. Joint accounts were analyzed, assets listed, divorce papers were drafted, awaiting only a signature. Finally, the day of the encounter arrived, a Thursday. In the morning, Diogo kissed her and said with an air of regret, "Love, today I'll have to work late." The board scheduled a last-minute dinner to close a project. Boring stuff, but necessary. Fernanda, who had known about the meeting for 2 weeks, just nodded, her face contorting in an expression of pain. "It's okay. My migraine is killing me today. Anyway, I think I'll take strong medicine. I'll work and tonight try to sleep early." The expression of relief on his face was almost imperceptible, but she saw it. He was reassured. The path was clear. At 7 p.m. he got ready, putting on the special cologne, the one with the scent of betrayal. She was already home complaining of a headache. He gave her a kiss on the forehead and told her to take care of herself and to call if she needed anything. As soon as the door closed, Fernanda's migraine disappeared miraculously. She didn't dress to seduce or compete. She dressed for battle. A black dress, elegant and sober, dark red lipstick like a declaration of war, and in her hair, instead of loose, a severe and imposing bun. She wasn't the betrayed wife. She was the judge. Fernanda managed to arrive at the Italian restaurant 20 minutes before the scheduled time. It was a sophisticated place with candlelight and low music. She asked the receptionist for a discreet table in a corner, claiming she was waiting for someone and wanted privacy. From her post, she had a strategic view of the entire entrance and main hall. She ordered a glass of red wine and waited. Shortly after, they entered. Diogo gallantly held the door for Letitia, who wore a vibrant red dress, exactly as he had requested in the messages. They smiled complicitly and were led to a romantic table in the center of the hall. He pulled out the chair for her. He looked at her with an adoration that Fernanda hadn't seen directed at herself in a decade. With a coldness she didn't know she possessed, Fernanda picked up her phone. Observing them from afar, she dialed Diogo's number. At their table, she saw his phone screen light up. He looked, frowned in irritation, and pressed the red button, canceling the call. The certainty, if she needed another one, was there in its rawest form. Then she sent a text message, the final verification blow. "Love, sorry to bother you. I can't find the migraine medicine, the strongest one. Where did you put it? The pain is unbearable." She watched. He picked up his phone again, his fingers typing quickly a response. Her phone vibrated on the table. His message said, "It's in the second drawer on my side of the bed behind the watch box. Take 2 and rest. I love you." Fernanda read the message and a thin, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. Her heart no longer hurt. The anguish had given way to a glacial calm. There was no more emotion, just the fact. She watched them order appetizers, share bread, toast with their Prosecco glasses. The scene was of nauseating domesticity, a grotesque parody of the life she believed she had. The agony and disgust became unbearable. There was nothing more to see, nothing more to confirm. It was time to end the show. With a discreet gesture, she called the waiter, paid her bill with a credit card, and left a generous tip. She didn't want to leave loose ends, no unnecessary drama with the establishment. Everything needed to be clean, precise, surgical. She took the purse beside her, feeling the comforting weight of the brown envelope she kept inside. Then she stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. She adjusted the black dress, feeling the smooth fabric against her skin, armor for what was to come. With the purse in one hand and her spine straight, she began to walk toward them. The journey through the hall seemed to last an eternity. Other customers, immersed in their own conversations, barely noticed her passage. But for Fernanda, each step was heavy, loaded with the weight of 25 years of memories, of love, of lies. She could feel Diogo's gaze on her before he even recognized her. He probably saw her as just another customer passing by. But then she stopped right beside their table. Leticia's smile froze on her face. Confusion took over her features. Diogo looked up and the blood seemed to flee from his face. He went pale, his eyes wide in pure terror, his mouth half open, speechless. He looked from Fernanda to Leticia and back to Fernanda, like an animal caught in a trap. Fernanda didn't give him time to invent another farce. Without a word, she opened her purse and from there took out a large brown envelope. The sound of paper sliding over the white linen tablecloth was the only noise in that small universe of shock. Inside the envelope, visible, were the divorce papers and printed notifications of the blocking of all joint accounts, an action her lawyer had prepared to be executed at that exact moment. She pushed the envelope to the center of the table between his carpaccio plate and her wine glass. Then she looked directly into Diogo's eyes, the man she had once loved, and a calm, almost amused smile sprouted on her lips. Her voice came out firm, clear, and cutting, without a trace of tremor. Sign it, or give it to your twin brother. The silence that followed was absolute. Diogo's jaw opened and closed, but no sound came out. Leticia looked from the envelope to Fernanda, her previous arrogance completely disintegrated, replaced by stunned panic. Fernanda didn't wait for an answer. There was nothing more to be said. Her role there was fulfilled. She gave them one last look, a look that contained no pain or anger, just a cold finality. Then she turned her back and began to walk. Each step away from that table was a step toward herself. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the looks of the entire restaurant on her. She could feel the wave of shock she left in her wake. But she kept walking, her head held high, passing the stunned receptionist, crossing the glass door, and stepping out into the fresh night air, leaving the two immobile and destroyed at